how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Truth Defender podcast. We are coming to you from the greatest country in the world, deep in the heart of the Lone Star State, Dallas, Texas. I'm your host, Paul Aguilar. We really appreciate you guys stopping in. I know it's been a while. I hope everybody had a great Christmas break and a happy new year. I hope everybody's doing fine. If you guys are catching us on YouTube and you aren't already a subscriber, please consider hitting that subscribe button, as well as the bell icon and hitting that thumbs up. That'll really help us out as well. If you guys are on the go and you want to check us out, you can catch us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio at Truth Defender Podcast. We'll have all the links to our social media down below: Twitter, GETTR, Instagram, Facebook, and Rumble. And if you guys have any questions or comments for myself or our guest or topic recommendations, you can shoot us an email at thetruthDefender1776 at gmail.com. Our next guest is Mr. Mike Ricksecker, author, ghostorian, publisher, paranormal investigator, live stream host, and public speaker. He's written a handful of books as well. You guys can catch all of his books and all of the information about them on his website, MikeRicksecker.com. He's also does the podcast that's Connecting the Universe with Mike Ricksecker as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, Connecting the Universe. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Without further ado, Mr. Mike Ricksecker, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing pretty well, Paul. Thanks for having me on tonight. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we've kind of been teasing the audience for a while. We were actually going to get together kind of before Christmas, before everything kind of fell apart, and then
Right.
We've been kind of missing each other here recently. But like I mentioned before,
Yeah, all totally my fault. I'll own it.
No, it's all right. But the important part is that we got here, and we're up and running. So I really appreciate you taking the time as well. So I want to get this right. How many books do you actually have out, and which is the latest one?
Yeah, I have 12 books out right now. The latest is Alaska's Mysterious Triangle, which was inspired by my the time that I spent on the television show, The Alaska Triangle, which
Right.
aired on Travel Channel. So, and I also spent 3 years there when I was a member of the U.S. Air Force.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, so it was great to actually be able to go up there again, visit some of my old haunts, and then get a chance to actually write about it all as well.
Right. Yeah. So we'll take a look at these books here. So it's Walk in the Shadow is a complete guide to shadow people, which is very interesting as well. And the historic paranormal books: Ghosts of Maryland, Ghosts and Legends of Oklahoma, Campfire Tales, Midwest, Ghost Story and Case Files, Volume 1, and the Encounters with Paranormal series. We also, even on the Travel Channel, the Alaska Triangle, Animal Planets, The Haunted, and Bio Channels, my Ghost Story as well. So you're all over the place. Also, Coast to Coast I Am with George Norrie, which is obviously world renowned. We all know about that show. So there's like a handful of, very long list of shows and books and everything. So you stay busy, huh?
Yeah, I do stay pretty busy, and the one that I'm really proud of is the Shadow Dimension, which is a docu series that I produced and directed. That's running on Tubi TV right now, so you
Okay.
can go out there and watch that for free if you like. It's a 6-part docu series all about the world of shadow entities and
Mhm.
trying to discern. Okay, are these interdimensional beings that we're working with, or human spirits, a lot of different theories. We get into, ancient history and
Right.
things like that as well.
Yeah. So it's all. The shadow people is always obviously very interesting. You have it all over the world, and a lot of people see a lot of crazy things. I've had an experience once what I think was a ghost person. I'm not sure, but it was quite terrifying.
Yeah.
So I also found out here that you're actually on the I guess it's on iTunes, right? It's Who Saw the Men in Black, which is a show with Richard Dolan, yourself, and John F. Burroughs, right?
Yeah, and Richard Doty's a part of that as well. Yeah, it's a fantastic documentary that was produced by Darcy Weir, who saw the Men in Black. Yeah, you can find that on iTunes, Amazon, a couple other locations
Okay.
as well. And I was really happy to be a part of that. I met Darcy. Well, we had him on our show last year. Kind of talking a lot of UFOs and things like that. But I actually got a chance to meet him. Both of us were speaking at the UFO mega conference in Laughlin last June, and we got to talking about some different topics, and the topic of Men in Black came up because it is something that I've covered in my work as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of so I guess we can kind of break down what I mean, obviously everybody's seen the movie Men in Black, Will Smith and such, and the first one I guess was probably the best one. The last few, even the latest one was but whatever. For everybody out there, I'm sure a lot of people liked it. But so I guess we can kind of break down, I guess, when kind of Men in Black first, I guess, started being reported as being seen, and kind of what people think they are and why they exist. Can kind of go over that kind of history.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Men in Black are there's there are a lot of different ideas and theories as to who and what they may actually be. Are they part of some sort of secret government organization? Are they extraterrestrials? What exactly are these things? Uh, they seem to show up in locations which have had UFO activity. And this dates back to the late 1940s, the Murray Island incident, and others around that time. So this is like around Roswell era, and then into the 1950s. And the story that I always like to tell is with Albert K. Bender, and he's the guy that founded the International Flying Saucer Bureau in 1952 during the big UFO flap. And it was a fantastic organization. It blew up immediately within the first year. They went international. They had offices in the UK, in Australia. They had a monthly newsletter that they were putting out. And this is, you got to remember, this is a time in which there was no internet. Everything was done via snail mail. To make a long distance call was very expensive.
Right.
So, to be able to create an organization so big in such a short period of time is a major accomplishment. And then all of a sudden, a year later, just boom, he closed down shop. And, everybody wondered why. And so there were rumors that were percolating about, did the Men in Black get to him? And there are some stories by Gray Barker in the 1950s that he published, basically suspecting that it was the Men in Black,
Right.
and it was to some point. And in the early 1960s, Bender published a book, Flying Saucers and the Three Men, in which he explained what happened. And uh, he was basically being followed, by these. Uh, by these guys, and this seemed, very Men in Blackish, of course, but it was even more so. So, while he saw, like, one at the movie theater, one while he's walking down the street, those sorts of things, there's one night he goes home, ventures into his bedroom, and through the wall materialize these three hat-wearing, shadowy entities with glowing eyes that smelled like sulfur.
Mm.
Now, when I'm first hearing this story, I'm thinking, like we mentioned earlier, shadow people. This is a shadow person story. What in the world's going on here?
Right.
He believed that these were extraterrestrials. He had some interactions with them, and the story that he told was that these were extraterrestrials that had actually established a base in Antarctica, were harvesting resources from the Earth, and they told him he wasn't allowed to talk about their existence until they had left the planet, which their stay of time here on the planet was 15 years.
Mm.
And when he published the book was after they had left. But other people hear the story and they think, again, a Man in Black story. These are the Men in Black. So which one is it? And it's kind of like, depending on which lens you're looking at the story through, it could be something supernatural. It could be an ET. It could be these Men in Black.
Right. Yeah, it's always been kind of fascinating, I guess, when you hear stories about Men in Black, it's always kind of associated with UFOs. And I had never really heard any kind of stories, at least personally, that they'd be associated with any other kind of, I guess, phenomenon. It's only always ever been like if somebody had seen a UFO or they had some kind of an experience with one, then all of a sudden these guys would just be there, and and they'd come and maybe intimidate somebody or just kind of remind them that, hey, maybe it would kind of be wise of you to just misremember what you thought you remembered or what you thought you saw, um, you know, kind of for your own good. And that's always kind of been like the feeling that everybody would get whenever they have any kind of interaction with them. Um, have you ever heard of any like any other times when they'd have Men in Black show up that weren't associated with UFOs? Have there any ever been anything else like that?
Yeah, a lot of times they're associated with other top secret government incidents that are going on. Again, it does usually seem to be UFO associated, but there could be other secretive uh, things going on within the government that they do show up. Maybe you've seen something you weren't supposed to, and it might not be a UFO. It might be some other military technology or something like that. That they will show up at the house. They want to know what you saw and what you think you know about what you saw. Uh, Feed you a story, intimidate you, that sort of thing, and then they'll keep tabs on you for a while. So, my friend Richard Doty, who is also a part of that documentary, who saw the Men in Black, has actually worked with the real Men in Black, and it's a small contingent out of Fort Belvoir, and that's kind of their methods. Uh, they're covert yet intimidating. Now I'll get it's funny. I'll get accused sometimes of perhaps I was a man in black because I spent a few years at NSA,
Right.
and there were times that I had to dress up in the suit and everything because there were some uh, facilities outside the main NSA campus in which it was basically a secret location hidden in plain sight that
Yeah.
they didn't want people knowing, the general public knowing that this was actually a military operation. So we would have to kind of dress up and play the part. But we weren't doing uh, the interrogations and the intimidation and all that. That was saved for the other guys.
Sure. I'm all too familiar with hiding in plain sight. I've especially like around Washington, you see a lot of buildings that are kind
Mhm.
of like out there. They just have no like markings on the buildings, no numbers, no names. There's like no nothing, but inside there's some kind of law enforcement agency working out of there. I spent a lot of time in that area when I was in the Navy, so I would go through there like in and out and stuff. So
Yeah,
very
so you
familiar.
get it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm very familiar with all that kind of stuff. And I spent a lot of time in South Carolina. A lot of people don't know that we actually have nuclear reactors in that part of the country and stuff. And it's yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff out in the middle of the woods that you would see or you wouldn't see, but it's yeah, I'm all too familiar with it. It's kind of a weird thing, and just to think that they're just always out there watching you, especially when you don't have any idea that they exist or that they're out there, and then all of a sudden they're at your door, for whatever reason, and it's kind of a weird thing. Obviously, you hear a lot of stories about people that have seen them, and they always talk about how they kind of try to act human. I guess you would say, they don't know how to dress, they can't really speak correctly, and things like that, and I always find it fascinating that a lot of people would say that they try to like mimic humans, which would kind of lead you down the path of, well, are they actually human? Are they like like robots or whatever of some kind? But it's definitely odd when they actually have experiences with them. Um,
Yeah, and those are more of the ET type. So those are almost like similar to what Albert K. Bender had experienced, where and they had warned him off of his UFO research. But yeah, a lot of them seem very similar in nature, like same stature. They don't have any hair. They're very very rigid, and so they almost seem inhuman. And some of these could be ETs that are again maybe there's something going on within the world and they don't want to be found out, they don't want to be discovered, whatever it is that they're doing, stay away or something's going to happen to you.
sure. Yeah. I mean, I've always found it
If you've
interesting.
you've seen the footage of the two men in black there at Niagara Falls, right?
I think I have. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's two guys. They're walking into the hotel there at Niagara Falls. There had been a UFO sighting, and again, very like stern, very rigid. They're wearing the hats, no hair, and they want to see the manager and the individual that saw the UFO. And that's really all the information we have. But from the eyewitness accounts, their whole discernment was very, very rigid.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of a weird thing. I mean, I've heard it. I've heard different stories from a lot of people. Spoke with Raymond Zemansky, who actually had what he thought was a Men in Black encounter when he used to work at Wright Patterson Air Force base, and he, he said he was sitting out there one day and like at the smoke deck, and then he saw what he thought was a man in black, and he went up to him and was like, "Hey, can I take your picture?" This and that, blah blah blah. And the guy was like, "No, well, I don't think that's a good idea," whatever. But so it's kind of interesting that you have cases where there's people that they speak to somebody that they think is a man in black, and they seem normal. I mean, this guy was out there smoking or whatever, but so there's like that aspect of it. But then you have others where, like you said, there's no hair, no features and stuff like that. And then they look like they talk like they're robotic and like, you know, speaking monotone and all that stuff. And it's just like a weird way how they show up, I guess, depending on what the occasion is, or, like, I guess how far they have to go to actually intimidate somebody. But I mean, you obviously have the famous case of Dr. Herbert Hopkins, where they made, I guess it was a penny, actually disappear in his hand, and they said that if you don't stop what you're doing, the next time this is going to be like your heart, or insinuating that he would have some kind of a heart attack, or whatever. But I mean, I guess that would be one of like the biggest stories. Is there any other kind of stories that you've heard that are like as frightening or anything like that?
Um, you know, there are several, stories over the years of these, Men in Black showing up. You have Men in Black stories, around Point Pleasant, with the
Mhm.
Mothman stories, and so,
Right.
did that have to do with some sort of government operation, or was it related again to some sort of ET activity? What exactly was that? Because you have this fearsome moth creature that's been seen around the area. People relate it to the Silver Bridge collapse. Whether that was just coincidence or not, we don't know. There were some military installations around there, so maybe they're trying to keep people from finding out about that. But then you have the crazy stories about like injured cold and all that. So yeah, you have these different stories kind of interweaving together. So it almost seems like some of them, yes, they are government officials trying to keep you away from these secret military installations and whatever operations that are ongoing there. And again, they interrogate you to find out what do you know so far, what do you think you know. But then you have others that seem to be more extraterrestrial in nature, and when it comes to a place like that with Point Pleasant, it seems to be a mix of the two. So then it makes you wonder, okay, so is the government working with ETs there at that location? You have both factions there working together to try to keep the public out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, if it's something that this is like, I guess one of the things I'd always found fascinating when they would show up is, obviously, if, well, so I've heard multiple, I guess, thoughts on what people think they are. Obviously, some people think that there's some kind of demon because of the sulfur aspect, for those people. Other people that say that they work for the government, or other people that say they're aliens, or whatever. But it's kind of a weird thing that whenever something would happen, like a UFO or even the Mothman, that they would be there. So that would kind of, I guess, kind of lead you down the road of like, in my head, that maybe they were kind of testing the technology, and these people were just kind of out there to monitor and just to see like who was there to see, and then be like, hey, well, don't say anything or whatever. Or when it comes to like the Mothman, like the alien aspect of it, that maybe they're, I guess, some kind of aliens that are following along. I mean, it's always kind of a weird thing. I guess it would just kind of depend on what the occasion was and how they would show up. But um, it's kind of stories all over the place. I mean, have you heard of that kind of demon aspect of it as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, I get that a lot in the field that I do a lot of my research in, which comes out of the paranormal supernatural realm. And in my book, A Walk in the Shadows, Complete Guide to Shadow People, the whole last part of that book, there's a section on the darker side of things. So are these things demonic? Are they evil? That sort of thing. And in my opinion, that yes, there are some things that are truly evil in nature. I've encountered some of that, but I've been involved some way, shape, or form in this field for 30 years, and there's one case that I've been on that was actually deemed demonic. it was a red-eyed shadow entity, but um, for the most part, no, they're not demonic or evil. You can have like maybe a nasty human spirit that's doing something nefarious,
Right.
or you could have an extraterrestrial that they're good and bad.
Yep.
Um, people there are people out there who try to say, all these, all the spirits are evil, or all the shadow entities are evil, or all the ETs are evil. And then you have ones that'll say that all these things are benevolent and nice and they just want peace. And it's like, well, you guys aren't wrong. Yes, some of them are, but you're not right either.
Yeah.
Some of them, yes, are evil. Some of them are, nice and benevolent. It's just kind of like with humans. You have some humans that are good, some humans that are bad. Kind of like the yin and the yang. You're going to have your good and your bad in anything that you're actually dealing with in this universe. They're two sides of the coin.
Right. Yeah, it's always kind of interesting, I guess, to see, I guess how people interpret them. You know, just kind of based off what's actually happening out there. Like for the most part, when it comes to like aliens and such, I kind of lean toward more of like the military aspect of it. It's just me personally. I just knowing people that I've spoken to that are like still actively serving, and people within the intelligence community that I've spoken with, spent a lot of time with in the Middle East and such. So it's kind of a weird, I guess, kind of path that I started to follow and kind of lean more towards the military aspect of it instead of it actually being alien in nature. But I mean, I had a great story one time about, well, I won't say who, but it was a person I used to work with in the Middle East, and he was, I guess, I want to say he was kind of transitioning out of the military and into the intelligence aspect of what we were doing out there. And we were kind of hanging around one day and we were talking about like aliens and UFOs. That was just kind of what we did on our time off. And I found a lot of people that within the military that actually believe in, like I believe in aliens and I believe in UFOs, and like I've seen this and I've seen that. And it's just kind of a weird place to be when you're in the military. And this person that was in charge of large battalions of troops and all kinds of things, and we were kind of sitting there smoking on the smoke deck, and we kind of get to talking one night, and he's just like, yeah, these UFO things, there's no doubt that we know of them and we've been in contact with some and this and that, but the Men in Black thing kind of came up, and it's just like, oh yeah, these are our people, and like you know, it was kind of a weird roundabout way of saying that they weren't from outer space and that they weren't exactly human either. It was just kind of a weird kind of conversation we were having without actually nailing anything down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and but that's pretty much par for the course when it
yeah,
comes to being in the military. Because
yeah,
again, I spent 6 years in the Air Force, and whenever topics like that would come up, it was always this weird kind of dance that you
mhm,
did because you didn't want to say the wrong thing and end up in trouble. So even though everybody kind of knows something's going on, nobody
yeah,
wants to actually say it.
right. Yeah, it's definitely over the many years I was there, it was kind of a weird thing because it's like you kind of get confirmation, but then you kind of don't, and then I'm left with more
Right.
questions than I originally had, and I was just like, well, I think you said yes, but I wasn't sure, so I was just like, whatever. But it's like, yeah, just on to the next. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird thing. It's especially when it comes to places that are kind of, like you mentioned, top secret areas and things of that nature, and it's a lot of crazy, I guess, tailing and kind of watching. Like I mentioned, I worked on an installation where there's a lot of nuclear things that were going on. We even had like giant like Russian barges that would kind of pass on the waterfront and be trying to spy on us, and all kinds of crazy things that would happen. And um, yeah, it's just out in the middle of the woods. You would see a lot of weird things out there in South Carolina, and it's
Yeah.
like out on the river and such. So it's definitely interesting, but it's just kind of, I mean, like everything else when it comes to the paranormal, you would really love to know, and you would probably never get like any kind of certain answer, like definitive
No,
answer
it's
on
it's
what it
like
is.
yeah, anything that that you think you get an answer for, it's really just like a small piece, but it leads to about 100 more questions.
Yeah.
So, you see something, okay, I saw something, I have a pretty good idea of what that is, but wait a minute, how did that work? How did that manifest? How did that come about? So it just leads you down a rabbit hole of more and more questions. And but yeah, being in the military and being a part of some top secret areas, there are things that even today, I could still kind of question, okay, what exactly can or can I not talk about? I was up there in
Yeah.
in Alaska just after the end of the Cold War, after the USSR had dissolved.
Right.
And it's just across the water over there.
Yeah. You could see
And we
it.
don't know what's going on. An earthquake hits, it goes off like a bomb, and you're like, wait a minute, it's was that Russia? What was going on?
Yeah.
Um, but then ending up at NSA, kind of almost basically the other side of the country, and that's like a whole other world. And
Mm.
there are some really wild things you see being involved in there.
Yeah.
And and so yeah, these types of interviews like this, I kind of do a little bit of a dance, and there's certain things
Mhm.
that I know I can say and other things that I know I have to refrain from. So um
Yeah.
so yeah, it's an interesting world. And even when you're in there, like we talked about earlier, you're kind of doing that little dance. So what can we actually talk about?
Sure. No, yeah,
Yeah.
it's rough. I mean, and I've had a lot of conversations, especially on air. Well, half conversations where I have so many stories and things that I would like to discuss, and I know that I know this and that, and just like, well,
Yeah.
maybe keep this out and kind of insinuate maybe this and that, but it's rough when you can't say anything because then people think you're lying or you're full of shit. Sorry, excuse my language, but
No, they'll show up at your door. I mean, I was on Jimmy Church's show,
yeah.
was it back in November,
Mm.
and he's been trying to get me to spill the beans about NSA for a while. And kind of in a joking fashion, like
Mm.
at the conference last year, UFO mega conference, he comes up to ask me a question. He's like, tell us all about NSA. I'm like, but on his show back in November, um, I told Jimmy, okay, we can go down that road a little bit, and because I know you want to talk about NSA, and
Sure.
so we start going down that road, and we're kind of dancing around a few things, and we got to a point. It's like I. I can't confirm or deny this over here. I don't
Sure.
want the guy showing up on my doorstep. And he's like, "Oh, don't worry, we won't go there because they'll show up on my doorstep too."
Mm.
So
Yeah.
even he's trying to be careful, even though he'll try to push it. He knows that there's a place where you have to stop.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, it's kind of a. I guess it's. I mean, obviously where you can and can't go, but it's kind of how far you want to get up to that line before you have to turn back, and But yeah, it sucks. It's especially holding some kind of security clearance and stuff like that. And there's a lot of stuff that I was associated with where I was required to have, my entire time when I was in the military. And all those stories are just kind of reserved for the people that lived it. Like all the people that you were there with. And even though you've seen a lot of cool stuff, and it's just like, sorry, man, like I can't tell you
Can't
anything.
go there.
Yeah,
Can't go
it's
there.
it's it's rough. Yeah, but so I guess like Men in Black, I've never. I don't know if you have, but has there ever been any kind of reports like around the world? I mean, I've only ever heard stories within the states. I've never. I mean, maybe one or two that have been. I guess maybe one that was kind of in the Middle East, but it wasn't like out in town anywhere. It was, like on some of the military bases. But
Yeah, it does seem to be more US based. And when it's international, like the Rendlesham Forest
mm,
incident,
right.
the Men in Black were involved with that as well. But again, you're talking about an Air Force installation.
Hmm.
So these Men in Black that basically interrogated Jim Penniston and John Burroughs, uh, you know, they were probably associated with the U.S. military, or if not the military, some sort of government faction. And they weren't the typical OSI guys, Office of Special Investigations. These were somebody else's
Right.
guys, but they were certainly Men in Black.
Sure.
And so, yeah, it's in the UK, but still a US Air Force installation.
Right.
Um, it's so you wonder, is this strictly a US thing, or is it, uh 'cause I'm trying to think here, the Canada thing,
Mm,
it was the, or Niagara Falls thing, that was the Canada side of Niagara Falls, so you could say that that one's international, but, I mean, it's just right across the border.
right.
Um, yeah, you don't hear too many other, international ones like that. I'd have to do a little bit of digging
Yeah.
because I think there's been some ones in Germany. I can't think off the top of my head, though.
Yeah, it's definitely in my looking into it over, I mean, several years prior, but here recently, I never heard of anything that's associated with another country that we weren't associated with in either militarily or anything like that. But um, yeah, I mean, you never hear anything outside of the country. At least I've never heard of anything personally. I'm sure there's some out there, but um, it's kind of more. I've always been interested in. Obviously nobody knows who they are, where they come from, but has there ever been any kind of, I guess, insinuation as to what, I guess, government agency would be responsible for them? Because I've never heard like, like obviously we don't know, but like maybe this place has been associated or things like that.
Yeah, so a lot of time NSA gets accused of being the home of the Men in Black. The CIA is another
Yeah,
one. And then there's also the idea that they are their own little secret, government organization that doesn't have an official name.
right.
That they're somebody else's baby, or almost kind of works outside as their own entity.
Mm.
So what I can say as far as what can I say as far as NSA?
Yeah, no,
Um,
it's nothing really. I mean,
I would
it's
say, with my experience with NSA, there are certainly Men in Black type things that
mhm.
I did witness there. Can't say anything specific, but
Yeah, no, yeah, there's definitely like that those wings of certain agencies that
right,
they handle the special stuff and things like that. But like I said, it's without them actually coming forward and saying, who I work for this and freaking such and such. That's kind of just
right,
out there for anybody's interpretation, really. So, which is unfortunate. It's because even just kind of maybe narrowing it down a bit to kind of like, oh, well, they come from this part of the Air Force or this part
right.
of the NSA or whatever, then we can kind of give an idea. But yeah, I'm in the same boat. I've never heard of anything besides like FBI, stuff
Yeah,
like that,
well,
NSA.
yeah, well, like with NSA, I mean, a lot of people know that they're a very secretive organization. I didn't really see a lot of thug type of people while I was there. And
Mm,
that's what you usually have with, the Men in Black. They have, like we mentioned earlier, they interrogate you, they threaten you, that sort of thing. And it wasn't so much that I saw at NSA as it was, the information gathering, the surveillance, and without becoming the next Edward Snowden, I'll kind of stop
yeah,
there.
and yeah,
But I saw Snowden type stuff while I was there. I kind of
mhm,
helped support that sort of stuff. So,
sure.
um, and that's all I'm gonna say
Yeah,
about
yeah.
it.
No, it's kind of a weird. I mean, so I mean, obviously we all hear of Men in Black, and then so recently I had never heard of Women in Black, but apparently that's a thing now. I mean, have you heard of anything about that? Like in the past, had you heard of anything like that prior to, I guess, maybe the last 4 or 5 years? I never heard
Yeah,
anything.
not until recently. It does seem like women in black are becoming, a little bit more of a thing. But
Yeah,
when we're talking about your classic Men in Black cases from the late 40s, early
yeah,
1950s, and onward, no, they usually these were intimidating guys that would
yeah,
show up at your door. So yeah, the women in black thing is a little bit new, but you know, awesome. I'm
yeah, yeah. No, it's yeah.
I'm pro woman in black, absolutely.
We're all about equity here, so it's
Yeah,
and it's kind of. I mean, it's I guess it's kind of relates to the whole like Slender Man kind of thing. So like Slender Man didn't exist until people started bringing it up online, and then people
right.
started seeing it out in public. And I could say, I guess maybe because of the movies that all of a
Well, yeah,
sudden,
and
they're
Slender.
there.
That's another good point. The whole Slender Man thing, because yeah, that was it was a Photoshop contest, and the guy did a
Yeah.
great job on it because he included the creepy little story, and then
Mhm.
people started, perpetuating that and creating their own Slender Man photos and their own little stories to go along with it. But because of that, people people have been asking me for years, is Slender Man a type of shadow person? Is he a man in black and all that sort of thing because of the way he looks.
Right, right.
And it's like, no, he's not either one. I mean, he's a piece of fiction
Yeah.
that some people believe that because so many people have kind of put power into this thought and idea that
And then they
it's a
brought it to life.
they've brought it to life. It's a tulpa. It's a sentient being. It's the kind of Buddhist idea of the thought form coming to life. And perhaps because those things have happened in the past where people have put enough energy into something that a sentient being has come to life. Um, but no, Slender Man would not be a shadow person. No, Slender Man would not be a man in black. It would be his own thing if it's actually real.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a weird, I guess, kind of. I had never heard of Slender Man until they had that incident with those two little girls
Oh
saw that
yeah,
they had
that was
seen it,
terrible.
and then they had, but it was up until that point. I mean, you would see like the videos on YouTube and like the video games and such, but
Hmm.
prior to like when all that kind of stuff started happening, like you would never see any of that, and a lot of crazy stuff gets brought up online, and then it feeds into it, and like more and more people get behind it, and then it starts to become a thing, and it's just kind of a weird kind of thing of the internet. But um, yeah, it's kind of with the whole women in black thing. Um, and like I said, it's probably just one of those things where it's just popular nowadays, especially with the movies and such. And then all of a sudden, people started seeing them everywhere. But I've still never heard any kind of story where there was like, oh, well, there was a UFO, and then this woman came up and she was a man in black or whatever. And I'm sure the story's out there, obviously, because it's a thing now. But I've never heard anything related. But I mean, even with, I'd always thought maybe the Men in Black, would they kind of be related? Well, maybe not. They're probably their own separate thing. But do people kind of confuse them with like the Hat Man as well? Does that
Oh
ever come
sure.
up? Yeah.
Yeah, well, and the original story I told with Albert K. Bender, because they were wearing the hats.
Right.
It's kind of that thing like, oh, that's a hat man type of story. And um so yeah, there's the idea that some of these men in black could be those hat wearing type of shadow entities. And there's a lot of different ideas as to who and what they could possibly be. My good friend James Keenan, who does a lot of work out there in the Uintah Basin, like Skinwalker Ranch, Blind Frog
Right.
Ranch, all that. He has an idea that he thinks the hat might be some sort of technology, that there's
Right.
something within that hat that is, powering them, whether they're, an ET or something else that's helping them to maybe, whether it's you move through different dimensions, move through time, move across the country to different areas very quickly.
Right.
Um, you know, we don't know for sure, but it's an interesting idea.
Right. No, I mean, that would make sense. A lot of people that see the Hat Man or whatever, just kind of see that out of the corner of their eye. And when they look, they're not there all of a sudden. So, I mean, that would make sense. And it's kind of a terrifying, the whole Shadow Man aspect of it was, I mean, I had one experience when I was, I don't know, like 13 years old, 12 years old. So that was like, I don't know, 23 years ago or such. But um, so I'll tell you really quick. I was at home, and I used to, before I ever started sleeping with my door closed, and because of this reason is why I sleep with my bedroom door closed and
Mhm.
locked ever since this one point. But at that point, I used to sleep with my bedroom door wide open, and we had this long hallway that led all the way down to the dining room. And one day I was sleeping, and you know how you get that feeling that when you're asleep or like when you're laying down, you just have that feeling like somebody's behind you, but you don't want to turn around. And you're just like, if I turn around, there's going to be something there. um, so for some reason, I got the nerve to just turn over. And when I turned over, I was looking directly at the door, and there was somebody standing in the doorway, just staring at me. Um, and I sat there for maybe about 10 minutes or such. I didn't want to move or get up. And then after staring at it for so long, it finally turned and walked down the hall. So I get up. I don't know why. Go to the door, stick my head out the door, and look down the hallway, and I could see the figure just walking. It was just in the middle of the night, so you could just like see the shadow. And at the end of the hallway, you make a right. That's the dining room. And once you get into the dining room, on the right hand side, there is a swinging door into the kitchen. So I made the right at the end of the hall, and I started walking down the hallway, followed it, made that right as well into the dining room, came to the kitchen door, and the light was on. You could see it underneath the door. And to get in, you would just push the door open. You could walk into the kitchen. So I tried to push in, and the door wouldn't open like at all, wouldn't move or anything. Just trying to force it open over and over again, nothing. And then all after a while, it just opened by itself. Walked in, there was nobody in there. The kitchen was fairly small, and we had deadbolts on the back door. There's two of them, and then like the main lock. And from that back door, you go out into the backyard, um, and there was nobody in there, and all the locks were still locked. Like if we had closed them and everything, and then there was just nobody there. With the lights were on, so I don't know. Like that was just kind of my experience with it. That was the only time I had ever seen one. And like I said, I've been sleeping with my bedroom door locked ever since, and I'm never sleeping my door open because I don't want to wake up one day and then there's just somebody standing there. Whether it be an actual shadow man or somebody else, or, whatever. But I sleep with a gun next to my bed, so that would be
There you go.
that would be rough for whoever was actually there. So, but it's, and I mean, so I don't know. Like I'm from El Paso originally, way west Texas, Air Force Base, not Air Force Base, Army base. Used to live by the airport. Whether that's connected, whether there's reports of like UFOs and across the border, and they're right there in Juarez, Mexico. There's always crazy stuff happening there, related to like ghosts or UFOs. They even had like a few stories of Bigfoot, which was weird, like in the middle of the desert. I've never seen anything like that, but it's a lot of, I guess, Mexican people out there. So like the religious aspect of it comes into it as well. A lot of people from Mexico, and they practice their stuff out there as well. So it's a very hot area, within Texas out there because you're right on the border. So there's just a lot of crazy stuff happening out there. So it's weird. I mean, you see a lot of crazy stuff, especially stuff related to like demons and ghosts and
Right.
La Llorona. For anybody that knows what that is, she's out there as
Yep.
well. The Rio Grande. So it's a lot of crazy stuff up in the mountains as well, and it's just kind of it's definitely a great place if you're into that kind of stuff. You know, with ghosts and such. So that's always been a good spot for it. But like out here, I'm in Dallas now, so um, there's not a whole. I mean, there's apparently Bigfoot stories, with like inside of Dallas, like close to downtown, which is weird
Mhm.
because it's all buildings and such. And there's like one part of downtown Dallas where it's wide open, it's trees everywhere, and like a lot of bridges and stuff. So apparently they hide like in the bushes in there. I mean, that's
Interesting.
how that happens is weird, but I mean, nobody's ever been able to find one, so I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, because usually the reports are like out in the woods or even 'cause I spent 3 years in Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
There are some people who report, seeing them walk through the backyard. But yeah, in the downtown Dallas, I would not have guessed that.
So yeah, once you get, I guess, kind of South Dallas, you kind of cross this point where there's like several bridges into like South Dallas, like outside of Dallas.
Mhm.
And in that area underneath all the bridges, there's like this giant, I guess they're gonna turn it into like a park or something. So it's all grass and trees underneath and like a bunch of bushes and all that stuff. But I just don't see how they would get into that area without being seen, because at some point there you have to go to the city to get to that part. And it's just like I don't know, it's like a weird area that you wouldn't just expect, but it's really huge. So maybe in the middle of the night, but it's weird. It's a
Interesting.
weird part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to go take a trip and see what we can find, but at the same time I don't want to. So.
What happens if you encounter one?
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to see one, but when you come face to face, then
Yeah, tell them hold still so the picture's not blurry.
yeah, I know. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing, but yeah. And then I guess, so we were kind of talking about how you kind of get more sightings like around Air Force bases and such. And now it's especially like around the world. Um, I guess we kind of go back to that whole point we were talking about earlier when it comes to whether it's just like UFOs. Obviously, they had the Mothman uh, encounter as well, where where they showed up. But I guess, can you kind of maybe give your thoughts on? I guess we kind of already covered why it would just be UFOs, but um, how far does like the cover up aspect go when it comes to the Men in Black? I mean, has there ever been any kind of parts of government or like any kind of agencies that have come out and say like, oh, they don't exist, or have actually spoken about them?
Yeah, well, yeah, the U.S. government is not going to admit that we have uh, a, a division of guys that are going to go out there and interrogate you and intimidate you so you don't talk about things.
Yeah,
They won't ever admit that. There's when it comes to government, when it comes to cover-ups, conspiracy, I mean, they will deny, deny, deny until they're blue in the face,
right,
which is unfortunate. Um, it's so a few years back we interviewed John D'Souza. He's known as the X-Man. He's a
right,
former FBI agent, and we're talking to him about all kinds of different government conspiracies. We're talking 9/11 and all
mm,
these different things. And I asked him, I'm sure there's certain things you can't really talk about, being a former FBI agent. He's like, well, because there are so many different conspiracy theories and ideas and things like this out there, they actually don't mind us talking about a lot of these different topics, because there's so many different stories out there that, there's no way to discern what the real truth is anymore. So I was like,
right,
okay, great. So I asked him about TWA Flight 800, the one that, exploded coming out of New York, because I had a cousin who was on that flight.
mm,
And he said, you know what, Mike? That's the one thing I can't actually talk about.
mm,
And it was like, wow, okay. And if you look into that case, there is just, cover up upon cover up upon cover up with that. And it'd be my second cousin. He was my dad's cousin
mm,
that he went so, it was his daughter that he lost, and he just, went so over the top trying to get to the heart of the matter of what in the world actually happened in that case.
right,
Was it a missile that was accidentally launched? Was it a bomb, or what in the world happened on this thing? That it destroyed his marriage, which was really terrible. But yeah, to this day, the government still denied any
involvement.
wrongdoing there,
Yeah,
any involvement. And so um and so that'll happen, with a lot of these different, cases where they will deny, deny, deny. So they're never going to, admit that, yeah, we have a division out there that's doing this, that, or the other thing. Even when they release, the different CIA documents and things like that, like you can go to the CIA reading room, bring up all these old documents, and there's
right,
some interesting little tidbits that you can find in there, but there's so much that's redacted
exactly.
too. So it's like, yeah, you're trying to read it, and it's like half of this doesn't even make any sense because I can't put a sentence together here.
Yeah,
There'll be like, whole pages that are blacked out except for like one word.
word.
You
Yeah,
know,
that's the
it's
point.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
Yeah. And there's
yeah,
even some stuff like when I was doing my research for the Alaska Triangle book, where documents that had been out there in the CIA reading room that I could find elsewhere on the internet were no longer in the CIA reading room. So it's like, okay, why did that
mm,
get removed?
right. Yeah, it's kind of so you can obviously lead to, or you could point to the JFK case as well. They were going to release all the documents, and I guess maybe they kind of released a few here and there, and then they closed everything else off, and now they're starting to push it back again. It's when it comes to like 9/11, like you said, I actually had James Corbin on the show, and we were talking about 9/11, and he was giving his thoughts on it as well. And even to this day, 9/11 is a sore spot for a lot of people. Obviously, it's for a lot of people that had other people that were in the towers or like on on the flights. Obviously for them, it's a very sore subject. They obviously have people that they lost on that day, but even just speaking about it, I was speaking with him about it for a show, and that show was taken down from YouTube. Like
Mhm.
they cited it for some kind of violation. I think it was like hate speech or something,
Oh, jeez.
which was like
Yeah.
ridiculous. I still have the episode. I have it on Rumble. If anybody wants to watch it, you can go back and watch it. But I was just like, what hate speech where? And I even wrote back to YouTube like a few times, and I was going back and forth with some people, and I was like, show me where like the hate speech is. And I even went back to watch the episode as well, and there was nothing in there that was like anything related. And they're just like, no, we just took it down. Like it was like hate speech, and you guys went against the guidelines or whatever they are. And then I was just like, like
Yeah, anything controversial anymore, they want no part of. So they'll cite whatever, whether it's hate speech or whatever, just to say, okay, something was in there, just because they don't want it on their platforms. They don't want to be. They're really really careful now about because they don't want some sort of lawsuit or even the government coming after them for some reason. So they just are really really finicky about anything controversial, which is sad because it's a form of censorship these days. We're supposed to have freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and all that, and it's just becoming more and more restricted these days.
yeah, yeah, it was unfortunate. I mean, you can't even. I mean, I don't know how many Facebook accounts I've lost over the years for the same reasons, and I have to start new ones up and stuff like that. And I'm only on there because of the show page and stuff like that. But um, we had tried to go live on Facebook for a while as well, and there was just too many complaints, and they would flag you for certain things, and it's just like it's not worth it. We can barely get
Yeah.
along on YouTube, and we're going to be moving over to Rumble or Getter, one of the two, but we'll be going live and stuff like that. So it's obviously the point is to get off of like YouTube and Facebook and then Twitter and all that stuff. That's just there's no way you could do any kind of real journalism, which is not what I do, but any kind of shows or anything that kind of relate to the truth. It's just not. You have
Yeah.
no shot.
Well, what you're doing actually is a bit of a form of journalism. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I guess we can
So
call it
it would fall yeah,
that.
it is. It would fall under freedom of the press, but
Right.
they just yeah,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
not gonna
I
it's
had
unfortunate.
never like experienced, I guess, crossing that line up until that point. Everything that like we kind of talk about, we kind of try to fly underneath that radar of like being too controversial. We speak about, we had a few episodes about China and what they're doing to all the Uyghur Muslims out there and stuff like that. And then we actually had um, a few pastors on and preachers and stuff and talking about all kinds of things like that. But we kind of hit that point where it's just like, all right, well, we can kind of fly by here. But yeah, once you start getting into some crazy stuff out there, they don't like it too much.
Yeah.
So, which is going to be weird because obviously they had the whole controversy with the Warriors part owner that was talking about the Muslims out there in China.
Mhm.
So next week we'll have a guest on who's actually out there right now who speaks about that. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's kind of a weird
Good
thing.
luck.
Yeah, it's gonna be rough, but we'll see if we can kind of get off of what we're doing here and just move along to something else. But yeah, so I guess with like our last few minutes that we have together here, I guess do you have any new books in the works? Do you have any kind of new topics that you're working on? You'd be able to share with us?
Um, sure. So, the next book I'm working on is connecting the universe. So it's kind of the theme of my podcast. Well, really, it's an interactive class that I put on
Hmm.
on Wednesday nights, and I end up putting it out there as a podcast later. But it's an entire classroom presentation. You can ask questions and all that through through the Connected Universe portal,
Right,
which is an online learning platform that I have together right now. So connecteduniverseportal.com.
right,
So I'm working on a book that covers all of those esoteric topics of the connected universe.
right.
So that's a big project that's underway. I just finished up the audiobook for Alaska's Mysterious Triangle. So that will be coming out here very soon. I'll also be doing an audiobook for the second edition of A Walk in the Shadows. So
Hmm.
uh, that second edition book is out, but the audiobook version of it is still first edition. So I need to
Okay, okay,
do the second edition. And we have a bunch of tours coming up. So, we're going to a lot of, fascinating uh, sites around the world. Ireland this summer.
Nice.
Next winter, next February, we're going back to Egypt, and next summer we're doing the whole Alaska Triangle tour as well. So a lot of different things like that that I'm going to be doing. And Shadow Dimension season two in the process of production. So
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah. And that
a lot of projects.
whole, yeah, yeah, absolutely stay busy. And that whole Alaskan Triangle is kind of, I guess what they say, it's like another triangle, like when it comes to the Bermuda Triangle. Is that kind of how that
Yeah, yeah,
works?
and some people, used to refer to it as Alaska's Bermuda Triangle,
Okay.
but with the new television show out, they just kind of truncated to the Alaska Triangle. But there are other places like that around the world too, like the Dragon Triangle out in Japan.
Right.
You had the Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts. There's a Lake Michigan Triangle. So you have all these different triangle areas, and it's kind of the same thing where you have missing airplanes, missing ships, all kinds of UFO sightings and crazy, paranormal activity that happens in this area. It's because of the unusual electromagnetic properties of the area.
Right. Yeah. I have a buddy that actually lives out in Alaska, like a remote area of Alaska where you have to take like another small Cessna just to get to where his
Hmm.
house is and such. So I've never spoken to him about anything related to like UFO or anything like that, but I don't think he would tell me either way. I don't think he really believes in it. So, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely an area where there's just a lot of secrecy around. Obviously, there's a lot of military bases out there and such, and you even have the Navy's underwater like sub listening station on like underwater and stuff. So there's a lot of weird stuff that actually happens out there, which you just can't. I guess you wouldn't be able to find out if you were just to go out there. They'd be watching you. But yeah, Mike, I really appreciate your time, sir. I really appreciate you
Yeah,
coming on. For everybody that wants to find the books, can they get those on Amazon as well as your website?
absolutely. Yeah, and Paul, thank you so much for having me on today and discussing the Men in Black. But yeah, you can go to my website, MikeRicksecker.com, that's another thing I've been working on is revamping the website. So new
Sure.
version of that will be coming out here in the next week. But yes, all my books are out there on Amazon as well.
Okay, so yeah, we'll have everything linked down below the website as well as the books. So everybody wants to go ahead and pick one up, as well as the podcast. If you guys want to check it out, you can go over to MikeRicksecker.com/podcasts. You'll find Connecting the Universe with Mike Ricksecker. And we'll have the portal listed as well, connecteduniverseportal.com. If you guys want to check out more about the Men in Black, you can head over to iTunes and check out Who Saw Men in Black. Yeah, I really appreciate it, sir. I appreciate your time, and I hope you come back one day and we can discuss your future projects as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for everybody that was checking us out today, we really appreciate you guys stopping in for another episode. Like I mentioned, we'll have all of the links to our social media down below: Twitter, GETTR, Instagram, Facebook, and Rumble. If you guys are catching us on the go, you want to check us out, you can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, as well as iHeartRadio at Truth Defender Podcast. Shoot us an email if you guys have any questions or comments for myself or our guests, or if you have any guest or topic recommendations, we can get those sorted out for you guys. Shoot us an email at thetruthDefender1776 at gmail.com. For everybody that we just picked up, a few listeners, different parts of the world, actually. So we got new listeners over the Christmas break from the Philippines, Spain, Puerto Rico, yeah, and from Nigeria, which is kind of a trip out. We actually reached out that far. So I appreciate you guys. Hong Kong as well, Japan and Poland. So thanks you guys for checking us out as well. Stay tuned for future episodes. Next week we'll be back with Mitch Gerber. He'll be back on again. We'll be definitely talking about what's going on in China still with the Uyghur Muslims as well as the Falun Gong. So to give us an update on what's going on out there with him. So everybody come back for another episode, and we really appreciate you guys. Everybody stay safe out there, stay blessed, and most of all, stay frosty.
Perfect.